Hello, everyone. I'm going to begin this series of recordings talking about this first section, and we're going to be looking at some different noxious weeds in Wyoming. So a noxious weed, just to start off, just a basic kind of characteristics of these are that they are legally classified as being weeds that you have to manage. So if you have any of these weeds in your area, you're required by law to actually try to manage these in some way or another. So these weeds have one or more of the following criteria. So they demonstrate the ability to aggressively invade native plant communities and agricultural crops. So just they have a really aggressive life history about how they go about their growth habits. Another thing that they can present is that they can injure or poison livestock, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. And they can also be carriers of disease or parasites. So that's another just dangerous thing that states don't want these introduced to other states just for fear of disease or parasite introductions. And they can negatively impact management of agricultural or natural ecosystems. So usually these weeds are really difficult to manage. And so usually with when you go to sell seed, there's usually a 2% tolerance for normal weed species, so species that are not noxious. However, with noxious weeds, if any sort of seed is contaminated with these, then you cannot sell your seeds to anyone. And then, like I mentioned before, transport of these weeds across state lines is prohibited. So the first one I want to talk to you about is Canada thistle. So this is a perennial plant, so it comes back year after year, and they reproduce by seeds and an extensive rootstock. So you can see over on this photo here on the top right, you can see how extensive this root system is coming from one plant. And so if you're trying to control for these, what's really important is that even if you get rid of the plants on top, you're still going to want to get rid of the roots on the bottom, because even like a 2-inch section of this root can, if it's just broken off, it can go and reproduce again. It's kind of like a hydra. So like if you just have one little piece of this root, it'll go and just multiply and just make new plants. So even if you get rid of it on the surface and you don't get rid of it underneath, below the surface, it's still there. It's still going to come back. So these plants are dioecious, so they have male and female flowers on separate plants. And these are, Canada thistle is really common on highly productive land. So it just really thrives in disturbed areas. So cropland, so with extensive tillage. And I've even seen it in areas that have been disturbed by like beaver ponds. So, you know, beavers come in and create this huge like pond system. And then if that, you know, if you get rid of your beavers, if you get rid of the pond and just let it go back to a normal state, then Canada thistle is most likely going to colonize and just really thrive in that disturbed area. So these Canada thistle is native throughout Europe and northern Asia, so that's kind of where they initially came from, so that's their native range. So being in the North America, South America, that's why it's considered invasive, because it was not naturally here. But it has the really pretty purplish pinkish flowers, which are beneficial for pollinators. So, and this is a photo of a weed mount. So you can see here some of the defining characteristics. It has that purplish flower, and then with leaves, they have these spines on them. So if you've ever encountered Canada thistle before, you know that it's really pokey, really ouchy. and it just has those spines on the leaf margin, so on the edges of the leaves, and then also going up the leaf spine in the middle. So that's just some defining characteristics. It also forms a small rosette at the ground level, and then when it gets to reaching the time for reproduction, it shoots up a stem, and then that's where the flowers appear. All right. Now moving on to jointed goat grass. So this is a winter annual, and it is established in most of North America's winter wheat areas. So over here in the western part of the United States, the states in red are where it's considered invasive, but I don't think this is an updated map because it is invasive in Wyoming. But it is very problematic because it has extreme seed contamination, so with wheat, and I'll talk about that on the next slide. And it competes with winter wheat, which results in reduced wheat yield, and it can actually hybridize with wheat. So with hybridization just means that it can reproduce with wheat to create a new plant. So you can kind of think about hybridization with mules. So that's, you know, where a horse and a donkey reproduce together and they produce a mule. So it's not the same as either of the two parent species, but it's kind of its own new thing. So with looking at jointed goat grass, you can see here that it looks really similar to wheat. It has these awns. It's just a little bit skinnier. It's called jointed goat grass because there's just seeds are just separated by these joints right here. So will be one seed in this little segment, and then with wheat plant, you know, it produces the little wheat berry in these little segments with awns coming off of them. And then looking over here, you can see how similar in, not necessarily like looking at it, you can definitely tell that it's different from the wheat seeds, but it's really similar in size and shape to the wheat seeds. So that's what makes it, if you're trying to like separate it through some sort of mechanical separation device, it's really difficult to get these seeds out of your wheat seed. And then looking at it as a plant mount, you can see here these little individual segments with that, followed with some longer awns. And then it's a grass, so it has the typical grass structure, so upright growth and long, slender leaves. And it doesn't really have too extensive of a root system, but it is a fibrous root system. All right, now we'll move on to field bindweed. So this is a perennial with reproduction from seeds and rhizomes. To me, it kind of looks like morning glories, if you're familiar with those. But it produces tiny mat-like growth. So this is troublesome in Western states. So with this mat-like growth, it gets tangled up in whatever crop you're trying to grow, and it can damage equipment. It can reduce your crop, crop growth and eventually crop yield. And you can see on this map where it's distributed. So it's found pretty much in the western part of the United States, kind of getting into the Midwest a little bit. All right, and here it is on a mount. So you can see this definite mat-like structure. It just grows, it just like tangles up and everything. You can just like kind of imagine that from this picture. And the leaves of these are kind of like, maybe they look like a spade. They're kind of like pointed with little hooks coming off that point back down towards the plant. And then another thing about this, how it gets tangled in equipment so easily, is this stem of it is pretty woody, so it's really difficult to break. So that's how it can just get wrapped around almost like rope in different implements on your machinery. All right, now we'll move on to Dalmatian toadflax. So this is a creeping perennial, so it has reproduction with seeds, but also with stolons and rhizomes. So with that, just meaning kind of like how we were talking with strawberries before, it can create like a branch, so a rhizome branch or stolon, my bad. Stolon is above ground, rhizome is below ground. And it can just branch out and produce new plants like that. So it invades rangelands, and it was introduced to the United States as an ornamental in the late 1800s for fabric dyeing and then also for medicinal uses. And it's native to the Mediterranean region. So especially off of it's called Dalmatian toadflax because it's found on the Dalmatian coast in the Mediterranean area. I think it's might be off of Croatia, but I'm not entirely sure on that. But it has these kind of thin, short, pointy leaves, and then it leads to this yellow flower. It kind of looks like a snapdragon. Yeah, and it's found in the western part of the United States. And so here it is on a weed mount, so you can see with the stolons how this branch would just kind of creep above ground and then just kind of settle down and put down new roots and essentially a new plant. Then these actual Dalmatian toadflax that you can see just comes and extends up off of this branch. So it has these short leaves with yellow flowers, and it has upright growth. All right. Now I think this is the last one for this set. This is Russian olive. So this is a tree, and it is fast growing in arid regions. It'll really capitalize on any water that it can find, and it takes it and it just uses it for itself. So that makes it really tough to grow any sort of natives around it because the natives will just be starved for water and die. Let's see here. And it spreads rapidly along waterways. So when I did some work down in New Mexico, this was really prevalent along the Rio Grande River. So it's really prevalent in this riparian habitat along rivers. And it's native to Western and Central Asia. So in those countries that are listed there. And in Iran, it is actually dried. The dried powder of the fruit is used mixed with milk for rheumatoid arthritis and for joint pains. So it'll form these little berries. Kind of looks like little olives, I guess, is probably why it was named a Russian olive. And you can see it kind of in these more arid states like Nevada, Utah. Like I said, I saw it in New Mexico. And we definitely have it here in Wyoming. And so just so for identifying this, it kind of has this shimmery quality to its leaves. So it almost looks like the leaves are always constantly frosted over or have a light snow on them. So I kind of remember that because when I think of Russia, I think of snow. So I always think that there's snow on the leaves of Russian olives. And this you can see the little berries coming off of it and a branch that will lead back to the tree. So that is the last of the noxious weeds that we're going to talk about.